Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Poo and welcome to day 114 of A Year of Change. Today we're going to sort of prepare for the next few weeks. I know that yesterday was a very long video, and a lot of information and a lot of math and numbers and charts and everything else, so we're going to sort of forego that and do things a little more basic. This won't be as dry as it was yesterday, so the main reason why I sort of want to talk about this is we're going to be starting to sort of ramp up over the next 2 or 3 weeks to start our little food tweaks again. And because of that, there are a few things that I'm sure that by now you've already seen on foods and different products that you've been buying and things like that. Because as we start sort of getting healthier overall, even before we actually start this in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm sure the majority of you are starting to look at nutrition labels and trying to pick out better choices when you're at the grocery store and stuff like that. But there are a few things that we need to watch out for. And it's not anything that is really sort of common sense. These are just like little loopholes that labels can get around. The nutrition label itself is usually okay. There are regulations put out by the FDA and by Canada as well that dictate exactly what needs to be on there and guidelines for that, even as far as the font that they use, everything. But there are a few little things that they can get around with those, and worse than that, usually people aren't looking at those, they're looking at what's on the cover. And so there are a number of ways that they can sort of get around some of the regulations to make it seem that the product is a little healthier than it really is. So that's sort of what I want to look at, because where we're going to be starting to do this, there are certain things that we need to be aware of so that when you're looking at the label, you're not getting tricked into thinking that it's something that's healthy when it's not. So we talked about trans fats before, how you can still say zero trans fat even if there's half a gram or less per serving. And it may not sound like a lot, but when you start adding those up, and apparently trans fats are very bad. You shouldn't be allowed to have any of them, which is why they're getting banned. But just even that small amount, when it comes to a serving size, they can adjust the serving size to sort of meet that so that it can say zero trans fat. And that's one of the things that you need to sort of look for, is a serving size isn't necessarily a recommended portion size. There are certain things that you can look at and say, you know what, there's no sugar, there's no fat, there's none of this. None of the bad stuff is in there. And then you look at the serving size of whatever it is, we'll say chips, just for the sake of argument, and it'll say serving size 4 chips. So, of course, a very small amount like that, they can say it's less than half a gram, so they can put it as 0. So for something like that, take a look at the serving size more than just the nutrition label itself. Because, let's face it, if you're going to be eating chips, you're not going to eat 4 of them. That's not a real portion size. It might be, the recommended portion size, but realistically speaking, we're going to eat a lot more than that. And it does that with everything. And you'll see that on, you'll see that on junk food as well. It'll say serving size, 1 cookie. Who eats 1 cookie? Psychopaths. That's who eat 1 cookie. That's it. And then they go, that's more than enough. So, just little things like that, keep an eye out for. There are certain things that you're going to be looking for anyway. Normally, we just look at the calories and then the fat and sugar and all the bad stuff and things like that. But, the nutrition label, like I say, the majority of it is going to be okay. But that's one thing that you can look out for. Plus, look on the back at the ingredients as well. If it says zero trans fat, if it's making a point, go take a look. If it'll say hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated anything, then that's trans fat. So, obviously right now we're still being realistic. If you want something that's going to have one in there, use your judgment that way. I don't want to sort of turn this into something where it's now all of a sudden, all right, you can only eat organic hummus. It's not realistic. Later on down the road, if you want to do that, that's fine. But there's a certain practicality that we need to follow while we're doing this. And part of that is buying processed food. It's much more convenient, just as long as you're making, the proper choices. So again, look at the serving size, because that's going to dictate really how much you're actually getting. If you're looking at something and it's spaghetti sauce and it says the serving is half a cup, that's reasonable, because chances are you're not pouring an entire cup of spaghetti sauce on your spaghetti. So something like that, that's okay. When it says, 2 tablespoons, then no. You need to look at it a little closer and sort of do some quick math and see where we can go from there. But more than the actual nutrition labels, because those are very strictly regulated, and there are just a couple of little things that you need to look out for just to sort of pay attention with that. There are some things on the front of the label that really aren't regulated at all and can really allow for you to think you're getting something that's healthy when it really, really isn't. Same thing with the trans fat. If it says 0 trans fat, chances are there's going to be something in there. So you can take a look at that. But there are other ones. Ones you see all the time is made with real fruit or made with real fruit juice. That doesn't mean anything. They can literally have, 1 apple in the midst of 2,000 gallons of high fructose corn syrup, and it can still say made with real fruit juice and made with real fruit. There's no limit. There's no lower limit to the amount that they can put in there. So they can literally just dump in a cup of apple juice into this giant industrial vat of shit, and they can still say it, because there isn't a parts per million or anything like that. So when you're looking at that, again, pay attention. Turn it around, take a look at it, see exactly how much juice is in there. And the amount of sugar that's going to be in there is going to give you a really good indicator as to how much real juice is in there. Because if the majority of it is just sort of sugar and coloring, then of course it's going to be shit. And that just doesn't mean just juice. I mean, you can find that in snacks. You can find that in those little gummy snack things, other snacks, I guess. Anything that says made with fruit juice. The whole wheat is another thing like that. You'll see all the time whole grain or made with whole grains and multigrain. Those, again, mean nothing. Multigrain and whole grain and all the other stuff doesn't mean that it's made just with 100% whole wheat or, whatever the grain is that you're talking about. Multigrain just means that they've used 2 different kinds. So they can say, good enough, it's refined white flour, and then they've thrown in some barley. Or, 1% rice flour or something. It doesn't mean it's any healthier. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have all the same stuff that something just regular would have. We'll take pasta, for example. Because I do buy a lot of the whole wheat pasta and multigrain pasta and stuff like that, or toast or whatever. Or, yes, you can just buy toast, bread, stuff like that. But it doesn't actually mean that it's any healthier than white bread. So it's just one of those things that you need to keep an eye out for. If you do see it, it sounds much healthier when you're looking at multigrain or made with whole wheat. Unless it actually says the percentage, then made with whole wheat could just mean that they flicked a whole wheat kernel in there amidst, again, an industrial vat filled with white flour. Not that white flour is necessarily bad, but it's one of those things that I don't care if you do just want to eat white bread and rice and not even go for the 100% whole wheat thing. But if you are going to go for it, then go for it. Try not to fool ourselves into thinking, oh, well, I'm being much healthier and this is 100% whole wheat, when it's not. It doesn't really mean anything unless there's an actual hard number attached to it. So that's another one that you need to look out for. There are other ones that are sort of just vague. You'll see all the time on labels it'll just say natural, which means fuck all. Natural means nothing. There's no ingredient in it. I mean, well, technically, you can actually have things that say natural flavoring and natural color, which are still synthetic and chemically created. So that doesn't really mean a whole lot. So if you're looking at something and it says, oh, 100% natural, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that it was, grown in a garden and created specifically for this. It could still just be all chemicals. And that sort of goes the other way as well. Not all chemicals are bad. You're going to see a lot of stuff in there you're not going to be able to pronounce. But again, one of those things, do some research. Take a look at it. I can't remember the name of it. I'll put it up here. It's a really long, convoluted name that sounds very, very scary. But it's actually just vitamin E. But because of whatever the regulations are, they can't just say, oh, it's got vitamin E, because they need to actually specify what the ingredients are. So if you're looking at something and you're seeing, a lot of terms that you don't understand, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. You just need to be able to educate yourself and get to a point where you can pronounce it. Unfortunately, I can't, because I can't remember what it is. But different food additives and things like that doesn't necessarily make it bad. So, I'm trying to think of the last thing I had, and I found it. Okay. Again, my cheat sheet. Poop. There we go. The last thing that I want to talk about, and I've mentioned this before as well, is anything that says, blank free, whatever that is, sugar-free or fat-free. It's designed to get people to say, oh, well, good enough, it's fat-free, so I can have what I want, and it won't cause any problems. But I'm focusing on the fat-free right now because we've talked about that before. Usually what that means is that there's another substitute in there to make it taste good. Fats and sugars and things like that, our body enjoys it because that's what makes things taste good. So if you're looking at something and it says fat-free, take a look and compare it to the same sort of item in the store that isn't fat-free. And what you're probably going to notice is that it's either higher in sugar or there's some additive in there that's going to increase it. Now, if sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's simply, no, they've taken the fat out. There's no fat in there. There are some things, obviously, that you don't need to say 100% fat-free, like juice, like orange juice. There's no fat in it anyway. So don't just grab that and say, oh, well, this is obviously healthier for me, because it could be just jam-packed full of sugar. And same thing with sugar-free. They've probably added something else in there to, make that taste good. And if you're like me and you don't really react well to artificial sweeteners, take a look at that. Because that's something that, especially if it says sugar-free, they've probably put some sort of sweetener in there, and that may not turn out very well for you. But, there are a ton of other things that you can look at. I think the majority of I don't know what I'm going to say. I think the majority of nothing, because that doesn't make any sense. The main crux of the matter that I'm trying to bring to... Again, I don't know what I'm saying. The main point I'm trying to make... There we go. That sounds better. The main point I'm trying to make is basically just pay attention. Don't just grab something and say, well, no, it says it's healthy. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's bullshitting you into thinking it's healthy. And that's the problem with the labels, is that there really is they can't out and out lie. But just like the term nutritionist, there are a lot of terms that are just unprotected. Like natural and, fat-free, made with something. It's, as long as it's included in there, then they can put it in. And it doesn't really matter. So you really need to pay attention. And especially where we're starting over the next 2 or 3 weeks to take a look a little closer at the labels and try to tweak things like our protein and carbohydrates. What were the other ones? Sodium, fat, and sugar. There we go. Those are the 5. Over the next few weeks, you're going to want to start looking more and more at those labels and checking out the serving size and try to figure out how reasonable is that for a serving size. If there's something like salad dressing measured in tablespoons, then that's fine, because chances are you're not going to drown your salad in it. If it's something that is bread, usually it'll show you 1 or 2 slices. That's fine. These are reasonable servings. It's when you get into things that say, serving size, half a cookie. That's when you need to start looking and really paying attention. Take a look at the ingredients, see what's in there. Not that you have to be, vigilant saying, no, there's 0.5 grams of fat in this, so I can't obviously buy it. We still need fat. We still need sugar. We still need all that stuff. I heard a really good saying today, actually. It said that you can still have whatever you want. You just can't have it all at once. Or no, sorry. Yes, that's sort of what it was. You can have whatever you want, just not at the same time. So you can still have your cookies. You can still have chips. You can still have things that aren't really good for you. You just can't have them all at the same time. And that sort of steers more towards portion control than anything else. But when you're looking at the labels and you're looking at the serving size, just sort of do some quick math in your head to try to figure out, compare it with the size of the package itself. If you're looking at a jar of, say, it's a 1 liter jar. We'll just use that. I don't know, 12 ounces. There we go. I think a liter is 16. I don't know. Anyway, we'll look at a 12-ounce jar of something. If a serving size is 1 ounce, then you know there are 12 servings in there. You can quickly do the math and figure out, if I ate the entire bottle, how much would I get of everything? Not that you're going to sit and eat the entire jar of whatever it is, but that will give you an idea that over time, here's how much that's going to be. And those are the times that you might want to say, okay, well then I need to go and look at something else as an alternative. Prime example of that are the pickles that we did way back at the very beginning. Although I'm still going to eat them, even though their sodium is through the roof. But when you're looking at that, you can say, okay, throughout that entire jar, there's 160 calories, as compared to, say, a jar of M&Ms. So it's something to look at that way. That just sort of, I'm getting off topic here, because originally this was for labels, and now I've turned it into eating entire jars of food, which we really shouldn't do no matter what. But over time, that's going to give you a much better idea as to how healthy it is. Not that you need to do, a lot of math every single time that you go there. If you're looking through it, whatever the nutrition label says, and it says 100 grams or 150 grams or whatever it is. We've talked about this before, that, there are certain things that, 100 grams of meat is the size of a deck of playing cards, or a serving of vegetables is, 2 handfuls. If you can sort of add that to it and look at it and say, okay, I know roughly how much this is going to be. I know what it's going to look like on my plate. And in a regular serving, here's how much I can expect for that. That's something that over the next few weeks, we're going to need to start doing more and more. Because aside from the mindless eating that we do, when we're just sitting and watching TV and scarfing down snacks, that habit of just purchasing something because we want it, although we can still do that, don't worry, you're not cutting out anything yet. There is still some responsibility on our part to look at it and say, what am I getting out of this? Is it really high in sugar? Is it really high in fat? Is there something else that is just as good that I'll still enjoy that's going to be a better choice for that? You don't have to substitute and say, okay, well then I'm just going to have to get, unsalted crackers instead of, the cookies that I want. You can still do that. You can still buy your cookies, just, again, portion control, which we've talked about before. We haven't really gone into really in-depth for that, measuring and stuff like that, but I think that's a little ways down the road. But, I mean, anyway. I lost track already. That's all it takes. Just that little bit. You don't have to look at it and say, okay, I can't buy the cookies. I have to buy these unsalted crackers. You can still buy those. It's just as long as you're aware of it, you're going to be much more conscientious in what you're eating and the amount that you're eating. And especially where we've got 3 weeks now to sort of get prepared to start tweaking things back and forth. I think it's probably a good time to start just looking a little closer at those labels. Not that you need to cut anything out as of yet, but just so that you can look at it so that when we do start this up, you're going to know where your weak points are and say, you know what, I thought this was healthy this whole time, but it's jam-packed full of sugar, and that's why it tastes good. This thing that I've been buying this whole time that says 100% natural fruit juice, it doesn't mean anything. There's no actual juice in there. Little things like that, just to sort of start buying something that is going to be a little easier to help us along our way. To be a little easier? What? I don't know what I'm saying. This whole video has just been sort of weird things. Look, weird sayings and sentences and phrases that make no sense whatsoever. Anyway, okay, to summarize, we're going to summarize this and then we'll get out of here. Just take a closer look at the labels of the stuff that you're buying. Take a look at the back of the nutritional label itself, especially. Compare that with the ingredient list. If you're seeing stuff, in big bold letters on the front label saying fat-free or, zero trans fat or sugar-free or made with real wheat, unless it has a hard number to it, just be skeptical. Just never really trust anything that you see on there. And just compare it. You don't need to go to the whole food section or the organic section or all the health food places or anything like that. Just be a little more conscientious of what you're eating. And the fact that you're being more aware, just like tracking our food when we started 113 days ago. 114, I know, but still we didn't really start for that first week, so it's actually 107. Anyway, when we started way back then, just having that first week where you were tracking and just being more aware of it, it was a little easier to sort of get into the groove of things. And this is what this is designed to do as well. just being aware of what we're eating, you're going to start naturally picking out other things that are going to taste the same, that are going to have the same nutritional value, but maybe you're going to cut down a little bit on the fat or the sugar or whatever it is, just healthier stuff that still tastes good. Because let's face it, we can't just eat dried wheat, thin, crusty bread things. Because it's just not going to last. It's not practical. We need to have at least some treats every now and then. But as I heard today, you can have whatever you want. You just can't have it at the same time. Anyway, I've gone all over the place with this. Very disjointed, but hopefully it's a little easier to take in than the half-hour lecture that we did yesterday. So try to keep these a little short this week as well, and hopefully end on a high note. So good times. Anyway, right now though, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. And in the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.